Hello everyone, I'm Mikhail, co-founder of Halal Travel, Asia's largest Muslim travel and lifestyle platform with a reach of 9.4 million Muslims monthly. Over the last 5 years, we've worked with multiple national tourism organizations, and they've always cited food as a main challenge when it comes to attracting Muslim travelers to the country. Somehow it's very difficult for certain countries like Japan and Korea that have very heavy use of pork or alcohol in their cuisines to be able to adapt to the needs of Muslims. So today we have an expert who's also a personal friend, right, to show how international, to show and to share how international F&B brands can better serve Muslim customers. Stefan is a Group Strategic Director of Keen and providing the lead on strategic F&B consulting, and they have offices in London, Dubai, Bangkok, and Jeddah. And he's previously the F&B Senior Director at Marriott and for the Middle East. And he has over 300 F&B concepts to his name and brought brands like the Buddha Bar, Hakkasan, and Embassy to the Middle East. And his previous position include 10 years as a founder and CEO of Tribe, which is one of the most successful F&B strategy houses in the Middle East. And one more very interesting thing about him is that he's like me, right? We are both converts, and yes. So without further ado, over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Mikhail. Thank you very much. I will go through the presentation here and talk you through, as Mikhail said, the halal perspective and focus really on F&B, food and beverage, and give you some case studies of how we've operating restaurants in the Middle East and how we almost do it without hesitation. We've moved on so quickly in recent years, offering halal cuisine that I think it's almost become second nature. I won't repeat my credentials other than to say that I'm a strategist in terms of restaurants and the cafe and the restaurant industry. And I've been lucky to have worked also in Bangkok, where I've seen across the region some very interesting F&B developments. We're a business that is a strategy house. We're a design firm as well, so we combine strategic thinking with fantastic design across many different facets, across many different companies. In your part of the world, you might recognize Asset World in there. We work with many of the developers across the Middle East and across Asia and across Africa, and many restaurant brands as well that keep our feet on the ground. We move from quick service restaurants right across into high-end dining, which gives us a good perspective. And these are the kind of projects that we're working on in terms of strategy, which range from Caesar's Palace in Korea to some of the large developments you see in Saudi. We see Amala, bottom right. Mall developments, so we help with master planning malls, and Yas Island, which is home of the Formula One and the beautiful Ferrari building in red. There's some of our design work, so we're fortunate to have a very talented design team that creates some very progressive concepts, whilst also from the high end right through to quick service and casual dining. We're particularly proud about this. Treehouse opened in London. It's become one of London's most popular destination concepts on the rooftop of a hotel called Treehouse in Soho, London. Yeah, Dubai is a really fascinating case study, and I think we can look at this peculiar city, which the three B's, brunches, barbarians, and bling. It's a city that's kind of created its own spin, its own dynamism in the last 20 years. And I'm fortunate to have worked for 20 years in this place, and to be able to talk about the contrasts from the human spectacle of building the tallest, widest, meanest of everything, the tallest building, the biggest malls, of course. And yet, as that bottom right image shows, the contrast between the Muslim world and the way that Dubai has become very tolerant, if that's the right word. It's a word that's used here a lot, for other cultures. So we live amongst each other. Women in miniskirts next to the Dubai is not an uncommon sight. And we learn to live and to work with each other. And our learning points, I think, from the restaurant business over the years, this place absolutely exploded to become one of the top food destinations now in the world. And it exploded around about 15 years ago when tourism was really picking up. It is a tourism which is dedicated to shopping, frankly, shopping and the almost endless sun. And it jumped up by a factor of 6 in 4 or 5 years, the market grew by a factor of 6, by 600%. It was an extraordinary time. And it meant that Dubai can now host the kind of celebrity chefs you'd see in London, Paris, New York, and probably better than Sydney, and probably up there with Singapore, maybe more than Singapore. Now, this list is an extraordinary list of chefs that are here. But of course, none of these guys are actually here. Their names are above the door, but they are infrequent visitors. And so one can be either a fan of that approach or critical of that approach, but we do have these caliber chefs here. And recent launches like Nusret, originally from Turkey, the famous Salt Bay is the character there with the hand, who was was a YouTube sensation with David Beckham. And this guy has brought Turkish cuisine very successfully to Dubai. This is one I was involved with, which is perhaps not as impressive as Salt Bay's restaurant. But fish is an illustration of a concept where if you get it right in this part of the world, you can get fantastic levels of return. And fish had a payback, an extraordinary payback period of 45 days on the waterfront of a hotel. So that's an extraordinary time, and launched at a time when people were saying that the restaurant scene in Dubai was saturated. This is an interesting concept which taps into the Emirati world. So we have a celebration of Emirati cuisine here, a cuisine that's virtually unknown around the world, but this is a restaurant that opened 5-6 years ago in Abu Dhabi and has a contemporary take, a modern take on Emirati cuisine. And I do mean Emirati, so it doesn't have any Indian food in it. It doesn't have any Lebanese food in it. This is truly the food of the Bedouin, protein-based, rice-based, heavily spiced, designed to last, dates, but presented in a very modern way. And this is a good example where we're also beginning to see in the Middle East some interest in concepts that come from Southeast Asia. So this is inspired by a visit I made a few years ago to Korea, and Kimpo at the Conrad Hilton is a nice nod and a good example where we're beginning to see more influences, I think, from Southeast Asia than traditionally from North America. And there's some great local concepts popping up as well, which is good to see. This one in Saudi is called 12 Cups. And we're seeing locals invest in F&B, in restaurants. They're hesitating, understandably, to invest in restaurant concepts which are licensed, which have alcohol. So that's quite a rare thing to see, or there'll be a group of investors involved. It's unusual to have Emiratis or GCC nationals, as you call them, from the area, to invest in licensed concepts directly. It's often done indirectly. And one factor that we can't avoid is the increase now in experienced dining and the desire to have something more than just eating. Yeah, when was the last time we ate because we were hungry? But ultraviolet and sublimotion are two great concepts, one in Singapore, one in Ibiza, of people wanting so much more than just the cuisine. They want the environment to change around them. And these are great high-end examples of that. One factor, certainly in Dubai and all over the region, is that there has been, and it is in decline, I think, slowly, an obsession with Americana, things American, whether because consumerism was very much in desire, was the very desirable thing in the 80s and 90s, whatever it was, or an aspiration for the American lifestyle, whatever it was, it meant that we have a huge amount of F&B which is American based. And if we look around the malls around the world, even in Singapore and KL, you'll see a modest amount of brands which are of American origin, rarely more than 15%. But here in Dubai and across the Middle East, it's not uncommon for it to have at least half, certainly a third is the average, and in some cases 2/3 of the F&B concepts in a mall are American brands or American style brands. And I think that will change. That desire to mimic the American lifestyle, I think will decline as more GC nationals travel to other parts of the world. I guess many of them, because they were educated in the UK or the US, then carry this affection that they have for America. And in fact, let's talk about the fact that you can make profitable returns without relying on this chemical C2H5OH alcohol. And these brands here show that you can make significant returns. And some of these are restaurant brands. So on the left, I'm showing brands which came from Europe, European Union, including Italy, La Durée from France, Baker and Spice from London. None of these brands depended on alcohol for good and successful ROI. In the middle, there's a bunch of US brands I'm sure you recognize, from Starbucks to P.F. Chang's and Texas Roadhouse. Cheesecake Factory, arguably one of the most successful restaurants here, with extraordinary revenues in double digit in dollars and pushing 15 to 20 million in some cases per annum. No sign of alcohol, absolutely no need for it. And in fact, alcohol would probably diminish and reduce the income because local families are comfortable eating, particularly in restaurants like P.F. Chang and Cheesecake Factory. There on the right, you can see some other brands that have come internationally and locally created. And again, absolute no reliance on alcohol. We've got Batil, a local dates concept, Tribes from South Africa, Paparotti from your part of the world. Again, all thriving and doing very well without the need for C2H5OH. And we've had brands that are either American or perceived as American. And I think the growth in those brands has been driven by mall venues. The number of malls exploded here 5-10 years ago, and with it came a very high mix of F&B. The kind of user groups that are using those malls are Middle Eastern families, they're subcontinental families, and of course you mustn't overlook the fact that many of the Indian communities won't consume alcohol, so they've been quite influential on the mix of F&B in the mall. These brands you see on the right, they're all franchisors, the majority of franchisors, and they've adapted their concepts to live without a reliance on alcohol. And it should be said that with the Middle Eastern concepts there, many of them have almost substitute the income from alcohol with shisha. Shisha remains popular here. It's not popular with the governments. They are very aware of the health issues with shisha and try to restrict it in many countries, particularly Saudi, where it's banned. But it's very commonplace, particularly here in Dubai. And it's popular with operators because you're delivering 80-90% margins. Someone else does it for you. You get a guy that will actually look after shisha that's not on your payroll. So it's a very good revenue and income stream. And you could argue that actually that there's been some over-dependence on shisha, and it is causing harm in many ways. And I'm sensing that they'll restrict it more in the future. So that was a flying introduction to how we've achieved what we've achieved in the restaurant world in the Middle East. So Mikhail, please do fire away with the questions if you wish.
Oh, right. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you so much for the presentation. And now we can begin with the Q&A, right? If you don't mind, we'll ask some questions. The first question would be this, right? You mentioned, that you have a lot of experience working on strategy for very, very big brands around the world, right? From Arabica to all these different kind of brands that exist out there, Budaba, and so on. So my question is this: when it comes to your strategy itself, do you have a strategic thinking process, something that you use most of the time, right? And what can we, and perhaps some of the business owners or countries that they're thinking, they're tuning in right now, what can you learn from this?
Of course, yeah. Can you imagine if we didn't have any methodologies, any strategic, people wouldn't pay us, we wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. So of course, and that's what differentiates us from many firms, in that we don't accept the norm. We don't accept that you should continue to do something just because it's been done that way in the past. So if we look at mixed-use developments with hotels and with malls, what used to happen was that 20% of space, say, of a mall was F&B. And then the next mall would open again with 20% with the same tenants. And the next mall would open with the same tenants, or the same mix, the same food court. And I refuse to believe that you and I, our eating behavior stayed the same for the last 50 years, which is when the first food court was developed. So our methodology works out what the space should be, how much the total space should be, which may be more or less than 20%. It works out how many restaurants are needed, what kind of restaurants. It works out how many quick service, how many counter service, how many impulse. So by adding science to the process as much as you can, you get the right mix, which means the developer's happy, maximum income. You and I are happy that we can only eat in the food court with the same old brands. And then with franchise brands coming in, we can give them a route map as to how to develop their brands, how to shape their brands. So you mentioned Buddha Bar and Hakkasan. These guys, we didn't just cut and paste what they did from London or from Paris. We made sure that they adapted to the market. and the market might have obviously no pork as part of that. In some places, no alcohol, and in some places, a different taste profile, right? So we actually adapted the concepts to the market.
Amazing, amazing. So my other question would be this, right? I think a lot of people tuning in right now are from Asia, and they're thinking, oh, K-pop is something very big right now, and you cannot discount the fact that it has influenced many things, right? From the way people consume media to the food we eat, and the want to travel to Korea, right? And I'm seeing many more Korean restaurants opening in Malaysia and Indonesia. I'm wondering whether it's something that you see also in the Middle East, right? You did mention one example just now, but are there more of this kind of concepts popping up in the Middle East?
Yeah, slowly, we're getting there. There is, as I said in my slides, an obsession with the American world, maybe because of the education. They were educated in the US, East Coast, West Coast, in London, so they see things they like and bring it back with them. And then there was a wave of European concepts as well 10 years ago. I think we've opened a studio in Bangkok expressly to make sure we keep an eye on the Southeast Asian market, keep that channel open, because as you say, we have no Korean cuisine here, virtually no Korean cuisine, even though we've done one at the Conrad, and we think that could be the next wave. We had a wave of Peruvian Nikkei restaurants.
Peruvian.
Oh yeah, and globally Peruvian went wild 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
And it is an interesting mishmash, a wonderful mixture of cuisines. But we certainly are saying, and it's coming slowly, that concepts from Singapore, KL, from Bangkok in particular, they're likely to come to Dubai, to the Middle East.
That's interesting. What do you think is the biggest challenge you face, right, when it comes to a brand that wants to enter a space where the customers are predominantly Muslims? What are some of the challenges that you face? Is it something related to their mindset? Do they understand, or what do you think?
Restaurateurs, restaurant owners, we're remarkably conservative people, and we often don't have the kind of agility or the flexibility or the responsiveness to changing environments. And COVID has acted, the pandemic, awful though it's been, has acted as almost as a catalyst, and it's been a real wake-up call from it. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one for restaurateurs. But in many ways, it's given us a vision of the future. It may not be the vision we had originally or a vision that we want. It may be a vision dominated by delivery concepts, by cloud kitchens. It may be restaurants, kitchens without restaurants, without seating. It could be the social distancing. These are visions possibly of the future that we have to live and adapt with. So I think the biggest issue is we're terribly conservative in the restaurant world. I am bored with seeing the same old food courts and the same old names, and I that might suit. I'm a baby boomer. That might actually suit my generation. But I'm not interested in what suits the baby boomers. I don't need to sell to them anymore. They're retiring. I'm far more interested in your generation, Mikhail, and the generation that precedes you, in that they want things to change and change fast. They're used to rapid change. And restaurateurs, they're quite laughable. This is a menu. This will stay that way for 6 months. What? Why? Because chef can only cook those dishes, and if we change it will upset him. What if I like this dish, and why don't you combine it with that dish? And there's so much of a desire for flexibility in consumers now. Restaurateurs need to sit up and play that game.
Wow, interesting, right? Because I've sat in for a few conversations with industry experts, and I've heard many terms like cloud kitchen, or other in Japan it's called ghost kitchens, right? And many of these things starting to pop up, and using data to make decisions on how best to run your restaurant, right? And I'm just wondering, right, when it comes to brand, right, and building a brand and sustaining a brand and making sure that at every touch point, right, is the right kind of engagement with the user. I guess when we start moving into these new technologies and these new distribution systems, right, you'll start to lose some of that, right? Because you may end up buying your food on, like, I don't know, Food Panda, or some delivery platform, not good by the front, right? And you get certain experiences that it's bad, or the food comes in a certain way. I'm just wondering whether you have any thoughts on that, because it seems like we're heading there, right? because of COVID.
Absolutely. There's a place if you go to South Africa, it's a place where two oceans meet. South Africa,
Yes,
where the Indian Ocean meets the Atlantic Ocean meet,
yes.
and it's wild. And the two,
Yeah.
come from different places. One comes from North America, one comes from Asia, from India.
Yes.
And I sometimes think that our industry is a bit like that. On the one side, you've got the technology that I just described, the desire for change, the desire for the way that we provide food to meet our changing lifestyles, and those have changed rapidly in the last year, 5 years, 10 years. So there's that side. But then the other side is hospitality.
Yes.
Me being warm and welcoming and hospitable and producing great food is a completely different mindset to that other one. And the two oceans meet somewhere in the middle. And I'm paid to find the answer, how to still get technology and relevance and engagement from this group, whilst at the same time being nice to people and making them feel welcome, warm, safe, and rewarded, all those things. So you've got the two things are meeting. I don't know the answer, but I work very hard to find the answer for other people.
Interesting. Actually, want to touch on another point you just mentioned. Right? You mentioned that you're not interested in baby boomers, right? And you're interested in people of my generation, right? Maybe Gen Z and so on, right? And these people behave absolutely differently as compared to people who are slightly older, right, in the age group. What are some of the trends in terms of like the demand that you see in this group of people that is very different from the previous generations, right?
Sure.
I guess you mentioned a few, which is the demand for rapid iteration, right? What other things that you see in your line of work?
Yeah, of course. I was being playful when I said ignore baby boomers. They're still they've got deep pockets. They're the ones with the money.
Yes, it is true.
And of course, we should look after them. But of course, their numbers will diminish. That is nature. The numbers will diminish and the next generations will pop up. And of course, you're looking for people who are socially active. And of course, that will be the next, the millennials, the Gen X and Gen Y. In terms of trends with that group of people, it's satisfying their changing needs. And I said a moment ago that we're kind of stuck, with the printed menu. I remember seeing the first iPad menu 10, 12 years ago, and yet still proportionally 0.001%. And you think, what happened? I thought it was really cool, iPad menus. And I've seen kids on printed menus tap images and try to expand them on a printed menu, like three-year-olds thinking, what is this, a piece of paper? Why have you given me a piece of paper? And so I think we do need to sit up and take notice of that. And so as a trend goes, it's the uncomfortable thing that restaurant guests for 200 years since the restaurant was first created were happy to be dictated to. They were fairly comfortable with sitting in an environment designed by someone else that stays in one kind of style. It doesn't change during your meal, right? Or between your visits. They were happy to be given a piece of paper with a restricted number of things they can order from, driven by a combination of what the chef can cook and what they can make profit out of. And they were happy with the one person who's fairly nice to them, who you repeat what you want and they bring the food out. I just don't think the next generation's happy with that. They're not happy with having to sit in an environment that stays the same. Yes. Why? Because I could turn my TV, I could do that on my phone. But this all stays the same, even in the age of digitization. Why is my environment, I don't like that carpet. Why is that wall not coming to life? It's dead, it's sterile. So that's the first thing they're not happy with. They're not happy with, that's it, that's all I can order, and it's got to be fixed in that way. What if I want to combine that with that? Why is it fixed? They're not happy with that. Many people don't get, my son was one of them, why if someone comes out from the kitchen, I think, but they're dressed differently, they then ask you what you want. So, well, I'll have this. Then they go and talk to another guy who cooks it. Then he or she brings it out to you. And please, we really have moved in other forms of life. We have moved so much in terms of relaying information and communication, adaptability and information. And just having a one line, steak frite. Well, what kind of steak? Where's it from? Is it sustainable? Frite, what are the potatoes sustainable? Where do they come from? And you just think, let's use technology to bring all of that to life.
Amazing. Nowadays, we're talking about robots cooking for guests, right? And there's big Japan. I guess more applications of robotics and analytics will happen in restaurants. But I guess that's all. That's all we have for this session, right?
Well, just talk about robots. You already got robots out there. They're warm and they're soft. They're called humans. There's some awful service out there, and it's never their fault. It's just the wrong situation, the wrong people. You can't train people to do certain things, and maybe you can replace them by robots, right? And get at least efficient service. Yeah, but always with the human touch. Don't forget the human touch, right?
Just put a smiley face and everything's fine, right?
Oh no, that'd be cruel. That'd be cruel.
Okay, so that's all we have time for today. And I think one of the things that I personally learned from Stefan, right, is really the fact that F&B owners or even countries or in fact any other brand should constantly challenge the norm and to really understand that what kind of environments they are operating in, and what the users really want, because these things do change, right? Like, for example, he gave a very good example of the food courts, like 50 years ago. It's the same concept, and people expect to change. It could be Americana now, and it could be K-pop tomorrow, right? And it could be something else later. I think that's a very important, advice to have for all F&B owners. And it is really amazing time, because COVID, although it's been bad, but it's forced all of us to evolve. And now is the best time to consider technology, considering introducing new things. And that's all we have for today. Thank you, Stefan, for sharing with us. Right? And for the next session, remember to tune in to the next very interesting program. Right, we're talking about digital transformation and capability building for the food services industry. All right, thanks everyone.